Let's kick it off. We'll wait a couple minutes for anybody who is still getting settled or checking your audio settings. And yeah, one or two more minutes, get a comfy chair, get a glass of water, and we will get started. Right? You excited?
I'm excited.
All right. I think let's get going. And remember, if you miss any part of this, you can always come back and watch it later. So I want to welcome everyone to our second Facebook Live event of 2020. We're off to a really fun start to the year. My name is Christopher Angell. I'm the product manager for the t:slim X2 insulin pump. And today I'm joined by Keary Cheney from graceandsalt.net. Hi, Keary.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so this is going to be a little bit different. It's one of the few times that we actually have someone from outside the company here to join us. And Keary is going to talk about, sort of a roundabout way, her journey from diagnosis as an adult through now being both a parent of a child with type 1 and a reluctant pump user, an ultimate convert. I do have to let everyone know that this live event is intended for a US audience only. We're going to be discussing products that are only approved for use in the United States. And I am going to read this next bit just to make sure I get it right. We will be referring to our Control-IQ technology. Control-IQ technology is intended for the management of type 1 diabetes in persons 14 years of age and greater. And you can find full indications for use and important safety information, including an important boxed warning, on our website, tandemdiabetes.com/Control-IQ. So we've got that out of the way. I also want to remind everybody that we will be taking your questions at the end of the event. So at any time you can leave questions in the comment section, but those will all be addressed at the end. And if you're unable to watch the whole thing, or if you want to share this later, the video will be posted in the video section of Tandem Diabetes Care's Facebook page, so you can always go back to it later. Now, with that sort of housekeeping out of the way, I think we're going to dive into it. So, Keary, welcome again. Thanks for coming down. Your story is so great, and I'm really excited to share it with people today. And we cover a lot of ground, I think, in a relatively short amount of time. So if you could, to start out, describe your experience, your diagnosis experience, and finding out that you had type 1 diabetes.
Yeah, so it's a pretty long story, but I will condense it down for you. So my husband and I wanted to start a family, and we chose to do that through adoption. So in December of 2014, we flew to Uganda, where we were adopting our son, and thought we would be there for about 3 months in order to complete the process to come home back to the States after we got his visa and everything, and return back as a family of 3. And so we were over there. We lived in like a little tiny bungalow by the water. It was really small. Life was very simple. And the whole time I was there, I felt, really tired, but I kind of chalked it up to being a new mom, and I started to feel pretty sick and just really lethargic. I didn't have any energy left, and I was drinking water all the time. I was going to the bathroom all the time. I had all these crazy symptoms, and then this is when I was told that I had parasites, which is very common to get when you go to Uganda.
Right.
And my symptoms just kept getting worse, and I got to the point where I just couldn't get off the couch anymore, and even to carry a conversation was so much energy for me, and I thought, I don't think I can stay here feeling the way that I do. Like, it just felt scary. And so I made the really hard decision to fly home, and I thought if I could just see my doctor and get some American medicine, I would be feeling much better and back on a plane in about 2 weeks and return to the boys. And so I flew home and saw my doctor. I kept treating parasites, and I kept going downhill, and new symptoms were arising. And so I ended up staying at my parents' house because I couldn't even get up to get myself food anymore. And a month had gone by, and this is when I started to struggle to breathe, and that was really scary for me. And so my mom said, we're going to the emergency room. So I remember she drove me to the ER, and at this point I had completely lost my vision. I couldn't see anything anymore, so everything was just kind of white. And I remember being wheeled into the ER, but I couldn't see anything. I could still hear people talking, and the woman at the reception desk asked me the basic questions like, can you tell me your name? And then started asking me the questions if you've kind of like had a concussion or hit your head or something, do you know who the president is? What city were you born in? What day of the week is it? And I just told her these questions are too hard and I'm really tired. I just need to take a nap. And I went into a coma right there in the emergency room. And so I eventually woke up in the ICU and hooked up to IVs all over the place. And I had two initial thoughts, and one was, I have a really like horrific fear of needles. So I was really glad I was asleep when all of this happened. And two, like the parasites must have gone to my brain to land me a stay in the ICU. And so this is when I was told I'd been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And I didn't know the difference between the two at the time. And I said, no, surely they're wrong. They need to retest. You go to Uganda and it's not a matter of like, really, if you get parasites, it's more so when you get parasites. But like, who goes to Uganda and ends up with diabetes? So it was pretty shocking, just so unexpected because I was, uneducated about the difference between the two types.
Sure.
But reality set in really fast when they're pricking your fingers, poking you all over the place. And so it was a lot to learn. And my husband flew home just to kind of help me get back on my feet and then return to Uganda to be with our son. And during this time, I just kind of figured out, what does it look like to live with diabetes? What does that even mean? I didn't know anybody personally, like at the time, that had type 1. I didn't really know what type 1 was, so I kind of felt lonely and didn't know what I was doing. It just all felt really new. And so 2 months after I was diagnosed, we got a message about a little girl in Uganda who had just been diagnosed with type 1. Meanwhile, my husband and my son were over there and was told that she needed a foster family right away. And so my husband kind of did the single dad thing and took her in until I was able to, pack up some supplies in order to fly back. And so, almost overnight we went from 0 to 2 kids. And so I flew back to Uganda with a lot of supplies with me and just went through the course of, finishing the process for adopting 2 of our kids. And we ended up spending 15 months there before we returned back to the States as a family of 4 and 2 functioning pancreases short.
So really, in a matter of about 2 months, you went from knowing nothing about type 1 diabetes to being responsible not just for caring for yourself, but also caring for a child who you just met, basically in a country where you had almost no access to support or resources of any kind, right?
Yeah, I would say I knew nothing. Other than the title of the disease. And so it was a lot to learn, especially to do it for myself and then also for a child. And we know that management for an adult and a child is so very different. And, not having easy access to, support and resources was challenging. And so, doing that from 9,000 miles away, I did feel a little bit disconnected. So I just spent a lot of time reading books, reading websites, blogs, like getting my hands on as much information as I could online, just
Sure.
to, help myself to be educated in how to do this thing.
And so what kind of supplies did you have? What kind of access to things did you have in terms of, treating the disease, like insulin, syringes, testing supplies? How did that work?
I brought probably what I felt like was about 3 months worth of supplies with me from the States to Uganda. We were so unsure how long we would be there, so I thought that would be sufficient.
Right.
And Uganda just doesn't have a lot of access to supplies, unfortunately, and type 1 is very, I think, misunderstood, and a lot of people there understand type 2 diabetes, and that's mostly what gets diagnosed. So we would go to a pharmacy in the little town that we lived in, and you could find a glucose meter, but they wouldn't sell the test strips to go with the meter. And then you would go to another pharmacy and they would have test strips but no meter to go with it. So it was so hard to even like match up supplies, and you couldn't even find syringes in the town that we lived in, which was fairly small. And so we would have to go to the capital in order to have better access to supplies. And so in order to do that, any kind of transportation outside of our little town, you had to hire a driver since we didn't own a car there.
Sure.
And, you're going down dirt roads and it's, kind of crazy. But so we would hire a driver and it would take anywhere from 2 to 5 hours to get to the Capitol in hopes that they would have syringes. And then you'd get there and maybe they would be out. Or if you did find some, they were the only kind that came in like every 2 increments, which we know for a child, they're not using 2 units of insulin, for a small meal. So it was pretty hard. We couldn't rely on getting supplies there. So I would have friends and family here package up supplies and then mail a package to a stranger who happened to be coming to Uganda, and then my husband would hire a driver and drive several hours to the airport to meet a stranger to like pick up a suitcase, in order for my daughter and I just to stay alive.
Wow. I mean, it's so funny when we think about challenges with getting access to supplies here. It's like getting to the pharmacy after it closes, or like the prior authorization not getting through on time. And even that obviously is incredibly frustrating, but it's incredible. So I would imagine sort of feeling like kind of right out of the gate a role model, for your daughter in terms of care, trying to sort of normalize these routines that were new for you and new for her. Probably, you invest a lot of energy into sort of convincing her that, living with syringes, living with test strips and all that, like this is what normal life is like now.
Yeah, it was, I only lived with it for 2 months without her, and so those 2 months did feel kind of lonely because I didn't know people right off the bat. As soon as, she joined our family, it kind of just gave me this like courage inside of me that I gotta like step it up and be really brave for her. And in a really weird way, it was beautiful that I got to model everything for her. I got to do everything first, so it made it a little bit easier for her. She didn't speak any English when we met her, and she was 6 years old, so the language barrier made it really difficult. So we used a lot of hand signals. I bought a dictionary in town and translated words and taped those on the wall. But I think, kids watch you. They watch what you do. They model what you do. And I thought, she sees how I live with diabetes. She sees how I talk about diabetes. And so, I want to do the best job at living with this in the most positive light that I can for her, so that that's what she sees. That's what she's exposed to every day.
Yeah. So I'm obviously thinking about something like an insulin pump was like the furthest thing from your mind when you were living in Uganda. But sort of at what point did you become aware that they existed, or that they sort of were a thing?
Well, in the hospital they told me what an insulin pump was, but they said, we can talk to you about a CGM and an insulin pump, and I tuned the woman out before she could even finish her sentence. I was 0% interested. That was like not even on my radar. I was 26 years old when I was diagnosed, so I was a young adult, and it kind of felt like, I'm young, I'm supposed to be like hip and cool, and like, what's this bulky thing that you like have to wear around? And because I didn't know anybody with diabetes, I had never seen that, so it felt so foreign to me, and I just was so not interested. I thought, I want to feel like, okay, I have this disease, but I want to feel kind of free from it, and I don't want to feel like I have something attached to me that is visible or that I kind of have to like look over. And I just thought, if I could like go through life, like I can do the shots, I can do everything else, but like I'll kind of feel like I don't have diabetes. And so in my head, I thought that, that was kind of freedom for me.
Yeah, having been diagnosed as an adult too, I remember that, you have very clear memories of, yourself pre-diagnosis, of being like an adult, like of who you think you are before, this comes along and you realize that you actually had a whole lot more to learn. But yeah, I remember that feeling that like there's this difference between giving yourself medicine and wearing something.
Yeah, I would say it's hard not to, but everything when it comes to memories is, oh, do you remember before I had diabetes, or it's after diabetes?
Right.
And I think I so badly wanted to hold on to that pre-diabetes version of myself, and do the bare minimum of what I needed to do to, stay alive. And Yeah, it was a tough transition.
Yeah. All right, we're going to pause for just a second in case there's anybody joining late. If you are coming in late, want to let you know we're here with Keary Cheney from graceandsalt.net. We've just talked about her pretty incredible diagnosis story. We've crossed a couple continents already. So if you did join late, you'll be able to watch the whole video in the video section of our Facebook page. That'll all be up as soon as the live broadcast is over. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section, and we will get to those at the end. So, all right. So we do know, obviously, it's not a spoiler to say that you use a pump now. So how did that start? How did you sort of become open to that as a possibility, or sort of, start exploring that option?
Yeah, like I said, I was not interested whatsoever from the beginning, and I think that's the beauty of the diabetes community is, you make friends or you meet other people that live with the same thing, and you see that there's so many different ways to managing this disease, and there's no one right way to do it, and everybody does something a little differently. And I think for me it was making friends that also had diabetes. One, made me feel like seen and understood, but opened my eyes to other options that were out there, and seeing another person with type 1 that looked like me wearing a pump, like, it normalized it for me. I thought, oh, like, there's other people walking around this world also with the same disease, and they're wearing a pump, and like, their world's not falling apart, and and that was really cool, and I needed to see that. And so, immersing myself in the community and just kind of seeing what options were out there started to spark for me, like, oh, there might be something easier. And then, the more time you spend with friends, I thought we had this really great rhythm. We did have a good rhythm down, and I feel like, we managed diabetes well. And, my daughter and I would sit down, and we would have a friend with type 1, and we'd be going through like all of these steps just to like eat dinner, and testing your blood sugar and having to drop syringes and type in on the calculator, and it just was so like complicated. And then I look over and my friend literally just hits a couple of buttons and then starts eating. I'm like, that's so simple. Why don't I want that? And so it was, I think just being exposed to other people is really cool. And I think people just being open to talking about a misunderstood disease is a really cool way for other people to feel understood.
Yeah. So you got the opportunity to try the Tandem pump when you decided, I guess, because you didn't have anything else going on, to sign up to run the New York City Marathon with Beyond Type 1?
Yeah, so funny story. I wouldn't call myself a runner. I played all the sports growing up, and I was very good at them, but running was not one thing that I did or loved, and it was for sure challenging for me. And so there was something about, I think, turning 30 last year. I was like, I want to do something that really pushes me outside my comfort zone, and I guess I thought running would be a good idea. And so I saw Beyond Type 1 was putting a team together for the New York City Marathon, and when I was first diagnosed, I feel like there were all these voices around me telling me, what you can't do anymore, what's too scary, what's too dangerous, and it felt overwhelming, and I feel like that's all I was hearing, and I don't want my daughter to hear that. And so it was kind of like proving myself like that I could do this even with diabetes, because before diabetes I never would have considered running a marathon, and it was almost like I got diabetes, I'm like, I'm gonna do something really hard. So I, part of it was for myself, just to prove that my body could do something physically really challenging, and a lot of it was for my daughter, just to show her, you can do something really hard. And being a part of the Beyond Type 1 team, Tandem was one of the sponsors, and anybody who wasn't using a pump, had the option to try one out and see how their training was impacted, through pump therapy versus MDI. And I thought that was really cool because I started training on MDI, and trying to carry syringes and all this stuff, in my belt or my pockets was a lot of extra, it was more challenging. And so I was like, I feel like a pump might be a lot easier, just to manage different types of exercise. So yeah, that was how I initially got started.
Yeah, the first time I ran a race, I remember I would sort of pre-fill syringes in like certain increments, and then sort of try to slide them in just so that they wouldn't get like pushed in, so that I wasn't like measuring while I was running, and it makes a difference. And so, how much of a difference did you feel? Like, how long did it take before you felt like you had a sense between the difference between pump and MDI?
It was immediate. So I started on the pump in July, and I was already partway through training, and so just the amount of stuff that I didn't have to carry anymore was so nice. But I remember the first morning waking up after starting the pump, it was like this sigh of relief, and I get so emotional talking about it, but it was almost like I felt like I didn't have diabetes for the first time, because there was something doing so much of the work for me. And I didn't really see the enticement of a pump, because I thought, we're doing a good job, we have a rhythm, like I feel like we've got pretty good blood sugar on MDI, like why mess that up? And it wasn't until I went on the pump and felt that burden come off my shoulders, I didn't realize how much work I was having to put into achieving those results. And so it was, I feel like the word night and day difference doesn't even come close to explaining it.
Yeah. There's a way, I would think, even more so as a parent, which I haven't experienced having a child with diabetes, but there's like a way in which you really can't let yourself feel how much work it is, whatever you're doing, right? Because if you stop to think about that, like it's overwhelming, right? Like whatever management system you're using, right? Like diabetes is work no matter what, but like whatever you're doing, if you think about how much work it is every day, it'll just kind of bear at you. So I can certainly imagine, times two, or it's probably times more than two when you're doing it for someone else.
Yeah.
And so that was the Basal-IQ pump.
Correct.
And then you've recently updated to using Control-IQ software. How would you describe that difference?
I have loved it. I will say it has been a journey to get to where I am now. I've been on it for probably a month and a half or so, and I absolutely love it now. It took me a couple weeks in the beginning just to learn. It's a new system, so the pump is doing so much more for you than it did on Basal-IQ. Like, I feel like I had a really good rhythm with Basal-IQ, and then, I'm somebody that likes a lot of control, and so to suddenly just hand that over and, let a piece of technology do that for me was a little difficult, but, just with some trial and error and changing some settings made a huge difference. And so now I feel like I'm getting results, and I have my blood sugar, like, where I want it for the most part. Like, it's never perfect.
Sure.
But with so much less work and thought on my end, which has been so nice. Even going from MDI to a pump was a huge change, and then going from Basal-IQ to Control-IQ, there's days where, I go several hours and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, have I missed something? Because like, it's been doing so much work for me that, things that I had to fix in the past, it's, kind of catching those for me. So I feel like it's really freed up my mind a lot, and diabetes can feel all-consuming and feels like that's where all your thoughts are all the time, and I feel like it's freed up a lot of that space, just allow me to like, put energy into other areas of my life that I feel like I kind of had to like put on the back burner for a while.
Yeah. So what was it like for your daughter to watch you transition from, you guys using the same sort of technique for managing blood sugars to you, transitioning to a pump? And there's a lot of curiosity there.
She was so curious. I think when she saw just like how different it was, she was like, I want that. Like, it was no question. And honestly, like, I'm so glad that I was on it for a time before she got onto it, because, it is a complex system. It's not MDI. It's very different than what, I was doing in the past. And so for me to understand how it works, how to change an infusion set, all of these new steps that are involved, I'm so glad that I was able to learn those things before her starting, because I can only imagine how much harder it would have been for two of us to be doing that at the same time.
Yeah. Are you able to like sync up your cartridge changes and stuff?
Every once in a while, but I don't feel like it always works out like that.
Yeah, not surprised. And how'd the marathon go?
The marathon was amazing. It was the most incredible day, and also the hardest day of my life, physically at least. It was, I mean, for somebody who's not a runner, like, it was so challenging, and I think mile 20 is when I was like, what was I thinking? Why did I think this was a good idea? I'll never run again. And, you know, crossing that finish line, I don't know that I've ever felt like so proud of something that my body was able to accomplish. You know, that's a lot of miles to go. And I mean, now as soon as you're done running, you've got that runner's high and you're like, what can we run next? That was great. But in the moment, it was pretty painful, but it was amazing. I just, you know, before diabetes, a marathon never would have crossed my mind. And, you know, I kind of thought like, oh, that's for like elite athletes. And I think I just really wanted to prove to myself like I could do something that took a lot of work and was really challenging, and it was. But also to manage diabetes was, you know, a whole lot of extra stuff because everybody's running past me and I'm, you know, eating glucose tabs or whatever it is, and I'm like, nobody has to eat while they're running. And so, but it was amazing. It felt so good to do something like that, and, you know, for my daughter to be able to watch that, I want her to know like nothing has to stop her because of this.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know you're still relatively new into it, maybe 8 months into pumping or so.
Yeah, I'd say about that, yeah.
So if you could kind of go back in time and talk to your, I have no interest in a pump self, like, is there something that some message you would like to give her?
Yeah, I'm a pretty stubborn person sometimes. My mom would probably say that. And I remember, you know, in the hospital, right when I was diagnosed, I thought like, I just want to feel free. And to me, that meant not being attached to something. And, you know, over the last couple of years, our family has, you know, really learned what hope looks like. And, you know, for us, hope looks like a lot of things. And sometimes that's friends, sometimes that's community, sometimes that's, you know, giving back to the community. And sometimes it's a piece of technology that, you know, makes your day a whole lot easier. And so what I realize now is that I didn't really understand what freedom was. And so I laugh now because here we are like 4 years later, you know, using a pump, tubes and all, and I've never felt more free.
Wow. I think that's a great point to pause. I'm going to take a look for questions in a minute. Before we get there, yeah, one more time. If you missed any portion of this, please go back and check out the video section of our page. You'll be able to watch it from the beginning. And yeah, if you've only caught the end, the beginning definitely sets it up nicely. So I would encourage you to do that. So we will be taking questions now. We have to keep the questions obviously related to the topic at hand. So questions for Keary about her experience with diabetes and her journey is what we'd like to focus on. Questions will be fed to me by some screeners. So if I don't get to your question, I'm sorry. It may be that someone else asked something similar, or we ran out of time, or it was a little bit outside the bounds of what we were going for. But having said that, let's see. All right, we do have a few. So Lisa Ann wants to know, I think you started mentioning at the end, but maybe say a little more about how you feel about being attached to a tube now.
Yeah, I would say that was one of my biggest hesitations was, you know, being attached to something and then especially having like a tube. I think I was so hesitant to, and like I mentioned earlier, just being surrounded by other people in the community using different types of technology really helped me to open my eyes like, oh wow, it's really not that big of a deal. And when I really started to look at what the t:slim had to offer, I just felt like there were so many things that were just so incredible that it was really easy to look past the tube. And, you know, once you start it, you know, the first couple days feel a little awkward. It's something new, but sure. I mean, I would say it only took about a week or two to like, now it just feels like it's a part of me. And if I don't have it, like, I feel like something is missing. And so, you know, I totally understand that because that was me a couple of years ago, like, oh, how would you ever have a tube attached to you? And honestly, it's not a big deal. It doesn't get in the way. My daughter is on a tubed pump. She's 10 years old. She plays sports. Like, she's super active, and she's been on it for 2 months now, and she has never once at all like mentioned anything about the tube. And so it really isn't that big of a deal, and that's what I hear, like, you know, from most people. Like, you start it and it becomes a part of you.
Yeah. All right. Oh, here we go from Kelly. Wants to know about sort of how you became more involved in the type 1 diabetes community, and maybe any tips that she could follow.
Yeah, so, you know, my situation was a little unique because I was, you know, in Uganda, and so I didn't have access to meetups and, you know, different stuff like that. So initially, that's where I just kind of found the online community, and I immersed myself in there. And it started off with me just kind of sharing my experience of what diabetes was like, and that's how I got connected to other people, and really helped me feel connected when we were like physically so far away. And, you know, I didn't want our online relationships just to remain there. And so for us, it was really important to have like real in-person, you know, hangouts. And so, you know, for our family, we absolutely love diabetes camp. We go to a family diabetes camp where the whole family gets to go. We go in the winter, the summer, there's conferences. There's so much out there. And so just, you know, sometimes it feels scary, you know, when it's all new, but that has been one of the best and biggest gifts for our family, just to feel like we have people that, you know, understand what this is like.
Yeah. Yeah, it is so important. Again, going back, I mean, I remember the first time that I was at a meal and other people took out a meter to like check their blood sugar before they ate. It's just, seems like it wouldn't be a big deal, but it's like almost like stepping like through the, you know, into a different world, or all of a sudden like this is happening around you, and it changes how it feels completely.
It really does.
Okay, Kristen says, so the question, your daughter uses the same pump, so how is it different to manage diabetes for yourself versus another person?
Yeah, kids and adults are so different. I'm so glad that I started on it first so that I understood the system, so that I kind of knew what needed to be changed or not changed. I would say for the most part, everything is pretty similar because we're using the same system. It just comes down to our settings are very different, and you know, hers are going to look different at nighttime than mine are, and so the system itself is the same. So I don't know how much we're doing that is really that different.
And is she still using Basal-IQ?
She is using Basal-IQ, yes.
But that's, I guess, where you have most of your practice.
Correct.
Also.
Yeah. So I'm running both systems right now.
Yeah. And how is she? I mean, how much of it is she sort of taken over for herself at this point, or how much are you still?
Looking over her shoulder. The pump has been incredible for her. You know, she's so resilient, and, you know, her story is so unique, and she just really took this whole diabetes thing like by the horns, and I've been so proud of her. And, you know, no kid loves having to get shots, but she did it, and she knew that that was what she needed to do, and there was no option to just not take the shots. And so ever since starting the pump, I just see like this confidence in her that is like so new and big and exciting. And, you know, she always like gave herself her shots and, you know, would want to drop the insulin. I still like do the math and the calculations for her just to make sure that she has it correct, but now like you know, she's not fully doing all of her diabetes management, but as far as the pump, like she loves being able to like enter in the numbers, and it gives her like ownership to it. And I think it's a really good stepping stone for us, like to the day that she is ready to take that over. And I don't want to push her into that, and you know, I want it to be whenever she's ready, but I feel like this is a good step in her learning like how to operate the system and, you know, what to do so that she can have more independence.
All right. All right. It looks like we've had a few people write in. Looks like this is maybe more for me than for you, who are asking about wait times for their Control-IQ update. So that is something I know that we're aware of. The interest has been pretty overwhelming, and because there are a couple sort of steps to the process. Some of them are automated, some of them are manual. I know especially a few weeks ago, wait times were well beyond what we expected and what we what we want. I know that we've made a few changes to some of those processes to try to automate a few things and speed things up, but we are aware that it's still, for some people, taking longer than expected, and definitely sorry about that, and believe me, there are a lot of people working on it all the time. In one of our sort of FAQs about the update, we sort of break down how long each of the different steps should take or could take, and absolutely, if you find that in your case things are taking longer than what's outlined there, please do call, and hopefully we can help. Okay, here we're back to you. This is from Terry, and she wants to know what has helped you most about using the Tandem pup. So she's just received hers, and she's waiting to be trained. So she's kind of, where you were, 8 months ago, I guess.
Oh my gosh, that's so hard to answer. I feel like there's been so many amazing things. I would say one of the biggest things is like my emotional, like my mental health. Just, managing diabetes for 2 people is a lot of work, and just the weight that it took off my shoulders was so nice. And it, I would say now using, Dexcom with a pump and just kind of this automated system, I feel most like my pre-diabetic self than I have ever, and that feels really good.
Wow. Good luck, Terry. We hope you feel that way
Yes.
soon. And okay, here we have not a question but a comment. Michael says, hang in there, Keary. Being a super D-mom is hard work, but with effort and all the new tech, she can have an amazing life. I've been doing this D thing for 64 years and am healthier than most folks my age.
Way to go, Michael.
Yeah, that's nice. Thank you for
amazing.
sharing that, Michael. Doesn't look like we have any more questions right now. So I guess we'll wrap it up. I want to thank all you guys for tuning in and for the questions. Thanks so much for coming in and sharing this with everyone. This is really great. And then I want to thank the other people in the room who you can't see, Grace and Blair and Kelsey, for putting this on and for handling all your questions, and probably handling lots more after we sign off. And then our legal team, who would be furious if I actually named them, but I have to thank them anyway. So again, if you want to watch this again, if you want to share it, if you missed any part, it will be up on the video section of our Facebook page for you to view at your leisure. And that is it. Thanks for tuning in, and keep your eye out for the next one.